Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Minds of Moria podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I have with me Trey. Today, we are going to be shifting a little bit away from what we've been doing a while, which is tournament reviews. Currently, Andrew is out of the country, so we're working on getting the GT part of our Adepticon out, but that's going to come out like sometime in June, which is going to be really late. But for now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing kind of a meta-ish discussion. Basically, we're just going to be talking about Men of the West, whether or not it is the best army in the game, or whether it's not the best army in the game. And then the second part of it, we're going to be starting a bit of a mini series where we're going to go kind of a deep dive into the scenarios. So we're going to be focusing on those, and we're going to start at the end of looking at the Men of the West going into the scenarios of Pool 1. So let's start with our first segment, which is the meta. Now, unfortunately, this is kind of a weird time for MESPG because there's not too much happening this summer. And then it'll hit August, and you get the August FAQ, you get Articon, you get Nova, and then a bunch of stuff start hitting off. So we're kind of in a weird time for MESPG where like a lot of the big tournaments in spring finish off, but there's not really too much in summer. But the big takeaway from spring, especially in the United States, was the dominance of Men of the West because at Articon, it took first place with Gandalf and Aragorn. It took first place at Nova, and it took first, second, and third at Adepticon. So clearly, this is a very good list, and it wasn't hit by any of the FAQ in February. So Trey, just initial thoughts over the past, 9 months or a year, Men of the West and its success. How has that really shifted kind of the meta that we've started to see form?
I mean, here's the thing. I think a lot of it was last edition. They had some of the tools there. They just weren't great. And nobody really knew how to build them. I figured out a build that worked, but it's still really interesting. This edition, they realized this is such an iconic scene in the movies. We want to make this a good list. And so they did. And so now they had all the rules there that made it very good without being good last edition. Now they made all of the models in it competitive. So they made everything competitive while still having great rules. And that's just what bumped it up. And since it's such an iconic thing in the movies, a lot of people started taking like, oh, it's themey. This will be cool. Then they started realizing it's good. Um, and here's the thing. I still don't think it's the top list in the game. I'll blow that list right. I'll blow that now. I think I underrate it more than Michael would. I think Michael would rate it higher than I would.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think it's a good list. And one of the big changes is basically everything in that list got better. They got better special rules.
mhm.
Aragorn became an absolute beast because he was pretty expensive last edition for what he did. Gwahir obviously got better, and there's a lot of fun combos in there. So I'm just gonna quick read through kind of the people that you can take in Men of the West and the rules for that, for those of you who don't know exactly what's in the list. So, as part of it, you have to take Aragorn, King Elisar. He's got all of his fun stuff, but you can take for your Heroes of Legend, you can take Gwahir or Imrahil, and then Valor you can take Aemir, Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas. Fortitude is Baragon, Captain of Dol Amroth, Captain of Minas Tirith, Captain of Rohan, Elladan, and Elrohir, and then the fun one drops of the independent heroes being Mariotic, Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took. But what again really makes Men of the West special isn't just what you can take in the list, because it kind of retained one of the only things through the new edition of sort of like this pseudo soup list where you can kind of combine stuff that isn't necessarily part of the same army list. But its special rules, one of them stayed the same, then it got added a couple of others. So the For Frodo, which was their last edition, was basically at the start of the fight phase, Aragorn says this, and within 6 inches of him, including himself, they get a plus 1 fight value and reroll ones. And it's treated as an active ability. Some of the other ones is Gandalf gets to reroll a single d6 in casting rolls he makes. This matters because Gandalf the White does not have his Staff of Power. This Day We Fight, which is the Fearless bubble, so long as Aragorn is alive and on the battlefield, the friendly models automatically pass any courage tests. And then one that I think is a bit underrated, is more of a fear factor than actually matters, is that friendly infantry models within 3 inches of a hero gain Dominant 2. So nothing like that blows it out of the water, but all of these special rules kind of add up together to create a really quality list.
I would agree. And here's the thing. It is super well balanced. And I think the thing that really holds the list together is if you can go an event and never play a list that either gets +1 to wound or is able to take down the D7 on the Minas Tirith, then you're fine. If you face anything that can just tear through the troops, you're genuinely just cooked. Depending on the build.
Yeah.
And a lot of the builds, it's so heavy on the heroes that your troops are there to hold space, and they do that amazingly.
Hmm.
But if the enemy has something that can tear through them, the list just falls apart so fast.
Yeah.
And I think that'll become a central thing of discussion when it comes to things that just destroy it. Anything that can isolate or destroy the troops fast munches Men of the West. Either
Yeah.
that or isolates and slows down the heroes. Like that's the one thing. Men of the West is so well balanced, and it is like it is beautifully balanced. However, it's also so balanced to play against because there's so many different ways you can attack it and take it down.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this edition and start some of the ways that I've started looking at my games too is a lot of it you go into it with your list and you're like, my list absolutely destroys troops face to face, or my list shuts down any and all heroes. And with Men of the West, they're both really good. There's not like a glaring weakness where it's like you have D3 troops or your heroes are bad or susceptible to magic, etc. But there are ways of attack. But
Right.
there's really three popular builds, the three main builds. The first one is kind of a classic, but you don't see it as much, which is Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and Aragorn and sometimes Legolas are on horse. So you get the three hunters, you get the synergies. It's good. It keeps all the same rules. You tend to get a bit higher on the model count as well. So that's the build that's kind of classic, but you don't really see it as much. The more popular build, especially in America, is the Gwahir build. So that's Aragorn, who has to be on foot, Gwahir, and then Legolas or a captain, depending on the points levels. And that one's really strong because Gwahir works excellently in the scenarios. He fills up a ton of the gaps of like, all right, he's insane at assassinating heroes that are hidden behind walls of troops. He can grab your objectives extremely fast. He can play all of those, pick up and grab objectives or fly in this. He adds to that mobility so much more. And he's super tanky with 3 points of might defense, 3 wounds, D8. So that's the more popular build, especially in America. But then another build that is interesting and really works well across the cities is Aragorn on horse and Gandalf on horse with Pippin. So it's just two heroes, but basically their horses are untouchable with, shooting, and between Gandalf and Aragorn, you can't really touch them with magic. So they're basically two heroes that are practically unstoppable. And then you back them out with about 20 or so warriors of Minas Tirith, and they just hold the line. So those are the three popular builds. I've played against all three. I think there's strengths and weaknesses to all of them.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is one of the biggest counter to the Aragorn Gandalf one is just monsters. Monsters eat that list for lunch because one hurl, Gandalf has lost most of his hitting power. One hurl, Aragorn loses a bunch. But you're right. Like against shooting and magic, it's really tough to deal with those two. The Aragorn Legolas uh, G- Gandalf or Gwahir one is a one that I think we're going to talk the most about, and
Yeah.
I think that's the main one I talk about when I talk about there's great strengths and it's super well balanced, but there are so many ways to take it down. However, and I think this is the beauty of the list, and this is why I actually really love playing against that list, simply because there's so many ways to play against it, play with it. It really does come down to player skill because there are so many ways you can mess up.
Yeah.
Like you can easily misplay Legolas. You can easily misplay Aragorn on foot. On foot, Aragorn is pretty easy once you get in a fight. If he is not in the fight in the right position, you can just kill yourself based on where Aragorn is, right? It's got such a high play expression that I think it is a great list. I love that list.
Yes.
And I love that there's ways to take it down. Now, to be fair, most of my lists also are genuinely normally pretty good at killing Gwaihirs because I do like lists that can kill heroes. It's either that or I like lists that have like no heroes that can do anything. So I don't really have an in between, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, 100% agree with that. I think again, what makes it really powerful, especially for the competitive players, and that's why we saw it again do so well in the hands of like a very good player like Richard Lynn, is between, objective play. You have basically a free march every turn. You have a Gua here. You have a Legolas who can pretty easily put wounds on a leader and gain VPs that way. You also just have the ability to sit in a shield wall and do really well, but it means you have to play well. A lot of times, if Aragorn is out of position and he dies, the whole list falls apart. If you are able to kill Aragorn in this list, it's basically over because then the Fearless goes down, the Free Might goes down, but it is extremely balanced in all aspects of the game. In the beginning game, it is very fast and mobile. Middle game, it has the ability to assassinate heroes, to just grind out in a shield wall. But it really thrives in the end game too, between, the dominance, so it doesn't 100% care about whether it's outnumbered or not, and the ability just to outmight your opponent. Because most of the times when you reach that end game, you're going to have your free might point. You're going to be able to get Aragorn and Gwahir to where you want them to the squishier heroes, to the leaders. And then through all of that, you're fearless, so none of you are running away to begin with. So it's extremely balanced in that it has the tools to take on any army in any scenario, but it's not oppressive like a white hand or like a Usurpers, where you look across the table and you're like, I think 10 times out of 10, I'm going to lose this game. It just has the ability to play and adapt in a lot of situations, which I think works really well in a veto system or in a non-veto system. So it is extremely balanced and does well through all of that. But as we're going to talk about now, there are a lot of ways to take it down.
Hmm. I mean, for clarification, which we will get to when we get to Adepticon games, I played 3 Aragorns. I killed 3 Aragorns. So yes, you can kill Aragorn. It's just tough to do. Honestly, why here is a much easier target. But
Yeah.
I mean, which do we just want to do more of a general thing for taking it down, or
Yeah, so I'm thinking we can start kind of the general ways of you have an army, these are your general ways of stopping. So, for example, I'm going to start with shooting because there are some armies that have shooting. And one of the things that Men of the West does well against is it can march up really fast. It's in a D7 shield wall. It has a Legolas with an Elven Cloak, so it technically can outshoot a lot of armies. So shooting is something that I think it negates pretty heavily, but I think there's still a bit of a purpose in that. Just because, I mean, if you look at, say, the Minister of Troops are D7 and shield wall, so is Aragorn. And popping a few wounds on Aragorn or a few wounds on Legolas does help, despite the fact if you are an evil army, the very easy tactic of putting in one of your evil models, setting up a row of guys with bows or throwing weapons, and shooting it out. Because again, this list, its Minister of Troops are going to get some kills when it's in its bubble and doing well, but a lot of the time these guys are going to be shielding at Fight 4 with the Aragorn banner. Most of that killing power comes from just grinding out between Aragorn, Legolas getting a few kills a turn with shooting, and Gwahir. So if you can kind of start mitigating that, shooting is one of the, I think, weaker ways to take it on, but there are ways of making sure you have target priority.
yes, I would say that that's really the biggest thing. When you're playing against a Men of the West army, like I've made this clear, I do not think it's best list in the game, but it is very popular and it is very good. But when you come up against it, the number one thing you need to do before even starting the game is create a game plan. What do you want to accomplish? What scenario are you in? Do you have any advantages in that scenario? What can they do to remove those advantages? I would say specifically look at banner points. Most Men of the West lists do not have a banner. If you have a banner and they don't, how can you turn that to your advantage? Is it a maneuvering scenario? Do you have a drum or some way of getting free marches or decently costed value marches? Can you keep up or are they going to go out? You've got to think through this. And I would say the biggest phase is deployment. When playing Men of the West, when you deploy your army, deploy it in obviously the best way, right? When you see their deployment, this is where you can really make your game plan. What you need to do is go, okay, now that I see where they're set up, I can kind of guess what they're going to do. Because that is another thing. Men of the West is a very predictable army. It gets somewhere and it will cook. Like it will just munch through
Yeah.
things. Uh, the Gwahir build is a little bit harder to predict simply because Gwahir can kind of go anywhere. But it's all about creating that game plan. If they set up in a way that is very protective on Aragorn and you've got a lot of shooting, what's your next game plan? For me, I'm looking at, well, do they have 50% spears, 50% shields? If they do, if they give me open shots on their spears, I'm just going to knock out as many spears as possible and then mean that they really have to be shielding or even take the inlays. If they give me open shots on the row here and just knock out some numbers. Um, Gwai here is extremely hard to hide from shooting, so shoot at Gwai here, right? If they leave Aragorn in the open, I would always just shoot at him,
Always.
force
Yeah.
him behind the lines, because if he goes behind the lines, he's much harder to be proactive with and where you want him to be, right? So creating a game plan and sticking to it. I would not say, well, I'm just going to wait and see. Do I want to go after Aragorn or Gwai here? No, from the get go, you need to be thinking, do I want Aragorn? Do I want Gwai here? Which one do I want to start with? Because obviously your end goal is always to kill both. But as a game plan, if I'm going to, most of the time I'm going Gwai here because Gwai here is extremely easy to bait. And once you have him baited, he isn't necessarily the hardest to kill. And so if that's the case, the entirety of the game, I'm setting up bait for Gwai here. I want him to go where I want him to go, even if it will cost me something. If I know
Yeah.
where Gwai here is going to be going, it's worth it for me because then I can set up all of my traps and tricks to take him out. Like that is the game plan. So
100%.
you need a game plan. You need to stick with it. You don't want to be, I'm going to go after Aragorn, and then something changes. Oh, I'll go. Actually, I'm going to go run off after Legolas. No, you want a game plan. You want to stick to it because that is where games are won. If you can't stick to a game plan, now if a game plan goes wrong, you got to just go. Okay, what's next, right?
Yeah.
But if nothing has necessarily gone wrong, don't necessarily just completely change unless it's like they made a massive mistake and Legolas and like two troops are within charge range and there's nothing stopping you, right? But I would encourage setting a game plan from deployment and working from there.
100%. Yeah, and I think a couple of things is important about game plans is don't just have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D. Have all of these contingencies. You have to plan well against it. And specifically with Gua here, a lot of the times in the games that I've seen I've played, a lot of the times most of the MNOS players are not afraid to fly Gua here, you know, by himself to grab an objective or go chase something down because I know a lot of the times he isn't going to die and he has a lot of ability to, but he is easier to bait. But one of the problems that he does deal with is magic, which I think is one of the harder ways, but can be successful ways to deal with Men of the West. Because, you look at Gua here and you're like, okay, three will, no resistant. That's you can deal with that depending on the level of casters you have. But then you look at Aragorn and you're like, all right, he has three will, he has resistance to magic, he has the Ring of Bara here, and a lot of times I've seen players just straight up call free resolves every turn. So now he's dealing with two will, and he has a will shield. But I think one of the things that makes Gua here a vulnerability is that ability to be transfixed or compelled or brought out into the open. But what's hard about it is he's fight 8. So not only do you have to follow up with that, you have to follow up with a kill shot, which sometimes mean you have to go in with lower fight value. But I think magic is a good way of slowing down with them. And again, depending on the level of magic you have, it's going to be very effective against that build. Against Aragorn and Gandalf, it becomes much trickier because Gandalf throws Fortify Spirit on Aragorn. Now they both have tons of will to resist. They both have resistance to magic. That's a much harder build to deal with magic and was much more popular, I think, when White Hand was very prevalent, especially across in the UK. But magic is a way of really tearing that list apart because, again, if you can get an early kill on Gwahir or on Aragorn, it really starts to slow down their game plan. Because if your opponent now only has Aragorn and Legolas and you have, your three or four heroes, that can be something that can be a problem for them.
And here's the other thing is I think in a competitive list, what is your goal? Um, I think a lot of people go into these games thinking, I need to kill Aragorn or get Whitehair. I do think it is possible to win without even touching either one.
Yes.
I'll reference a game where I was playing the Battle of Greenfields. And frankly, I should have lost. So we were playing Pool 2, which is notoriously bad for a like not 80 model list. No, it was 64, I believe.
Too many.
Versus
Too
their
many. That's
32.
the answer.
Well, there's only 19 Rangers of the North, so it wasn't that bad.
Oh no.
Um, and so the way the game turned out is like in first turn of shooting, it was a battle. I was just like, well, I know exactly what he's going to do. Put Gwaihair behind a building, but kind of out of position in order to do it, which is the right position, which is the right thing, because otherwise Gwaihair's just dead. I will sink all 21 points of me if I could kill Gwaihair on the first turn. because without
Hmm.
that, then I can deal with his list really easily. Um, and so he hid Gwaihir well, and then he moved everything up. Legolas had his Elven Cloak going, so I was just like, well, Aragorn's hiding, so I'm just gonna kill the guys closest to me so that I have a few extra, so I'll have an extra turn of shots. And so I used some might. I got like 3 kills, but then as soon as we got into combat, it was just literally here's the thing, like, yes, he has infinite might. I have 21 might. So in the might scale, to me, when I'm looking at that, we're pretty much even, or I'm at an advantage still. And so I set it up, pretty much created this weird concave. And as soon as Gwaihir committed, I was just like, I'm putting a bubble of hobbits around him and a few rangers of the north that are hiding so he can't get hurled. And then I'm calling moves and just popping one hobbit in a turn. And is that worth it for Gwaihir to call the move to get 2 hobbits? No, it's absolutely not. Is it worth it to barge off to get 2 more hobbits? I mean, it's better than one, right? So he was getting like 10 points of value out of Gwaihir a turn because Gwaihir just really wasn't able to get into a better position. And there was nowhere he could go that he could get better. And eventually he got a few ranges to the north because he was able to push in a little bit, which again, Gwaihir is insanely hard to counter in that regards. But I just got into the troops and just applied the pressure where I needed to, killed the troops using just points of might. I was just like Ranger of the North in there with another Ranger of the North as a spear sport, point of might, dead, point of might, dead. So I blew like 8 points of might just to kill Ranger, just kill Minas Tirith guys. And as soon as I built up an advantage, it was like, well, now I'm way ahead on kills because I got an early kill count in combat and in shooting. And then from there, it was just like, now I know how to play troops like a champ. So I was just like, feed Aragorn and these 2 dudes, one guy. It was just like feeding several areas of troops, just 1 or 2 guys. And then the rest of it just ganging up and just continuing that lead. And eventually, guess what? Time hits and you win, right? So it is possible. You just need to think of ways of how can I mitigate damage off Gwaihir? How can I mitigate damage off of Aragorn? And part of that, here's the thing, he easily could have won the game, but Aragorn got pinned in an awkward place. If Aragorn wasn't necessarily pinned in an awkward place, which only happened because of his protection from shooting, different game altogether. If Aragorn was able to
Yeah,
move 3 inches to his right, he should win the game. And there are a lot of little things about the list like that. You need to go in with that game plan, and killing troops can work if you have the means to do it.
100%. And I think something really important about what you said is might management, because
Correct.
I've played a game against the Men of the West where I had a very dominant position. I had 3 of the 4 objectives, was doing very well, and then I ran out of might. He broke me, tagged my heroes, I all ran away. So something very important to keep in mind, and what makes Men of the West very powerful is in most of the builds it's going to start out with between 6 to 9 points of might plus a free every turn. And when you get to that end game, you want to make sure that as someone playing against Men in the West, you have 1 to 2 points of might in your back pocket to prevent those heroic moves, to prevent them from spreading out. Because if you spend all your might too early, or if you don't have enough might to begin with, it can be a struggle in an uphill battle. Because a lot of the time it's going to be hard if Aragorn's still alive at the end of the game. And like kind of Trey talked about in his game, sometimes it's totally fine just to throw in a dude or two into Aragorn and let him get his 2 or 3 kills. I think it is a risk to run a big hero and just try and one-on-one with Aragorn, even with someone who's technically better on fight value, like a Glorfindel or someone else of that type, even a Balrog sometimes. But a lot of the times, Aragorn is able to outgrind those heroes. That free point of might can be used to strike, it can be used to defense. So a lot of the times it is okay just to leave Aragorn killing troops if that means he doesn't, if your big heroes are able to return fire on killing troops, because it is very important. If you start eliminating that support from Aragorn and forcing them into a tighter and tighter bubble, it's going to be really hard to keep him safe.
Agreed completely. And so I would say when you're going into it, I mean, when you're going into a tournament, as of late, I mean, the list I brought to the GT, I'll just say for right off the bat, was not tuned at all. I was planning on having a super fun list, and really, it was really just to destroy and ruin all of the Balrog players' days. And then the FAQ came out, but I liked the list too much, so I was like, I'm just gonna keep it. So But something big can work.
Yeah.
Hi, Rosie.
I think one thing too that's super important is kind of, again, yeah, like keeping your head cool sometimes. Because if Gua here comes and he kills your leader, you're like, oh my gosh, this is not good. But always stay in the game, always be present for that. So there's ways of defeating. There's also a lot of armies out there that I think aren't being run on a high level, not because they're good armies or even because they're the best armies, but have very powerful tactics and ways of just completely shutting down Men of the West. So the one army I'm gonna start with, because I actually played a match against Men of the West a couple days ago, is White Hand. Army of the White Hand is a fantastic counter to Men of the West for a couple reasons.
It's the best list in the game. That's the reason.
Yes, so we'll get into kind of at the end of this our rankings of where we think Man of the West ends up placing, but White Hand completely shuts it down because Grima takes away Aragorn's free point of might. It's basically useless unless he pairs it up with his other point of might to call actions, and once he runs out of his 3 points of might, that might point is completely useless, except for maybe calling a combat. I mean, using might to win the combat, not calling a combat. The magic between Saruman can just completely neuter Gwahir. Like Saruman's going to be safe, hiding behind somewhere. Crebain have line of sight. They're just going to stop Gwahir from doing anything. And then the Crebain and the ability just to trap and surround and eventually cut through is just really important. In the game that I played, Aragorn and Gwahir got 5 kills, and I broke and quartered them without breaking. So, Army of the White Hands is an extremely competitive list. I personally think it's one of the best list in the game, and it's a very strong counter. And there are a lot of other lists as well. I think Lothlorien also plays very well. That fight five, specifically the double caster Lothlorien, where you can shut down a Gwahir and Aragorn, and then get plus 1 wound with your fight five, really can hurt their battle line as well.
Completely agree. And I would throw in, obviously, this is entirely singularly just bias, but I would also throw in there Army of the Great Eye.
The
I have
one
that.
version that you like to run.
Oh, there's like three versions I left to run. Actually, no, there's like five. My Blackguard version is still beautiful. It's still wondrous. You may hate on it, but it is beautiful.
The
Uh,
strength five plays quite well into the D7. I will give you that.
it does. So in that one matchup, it's good.
Yeah.
But it really, it's got the options, and I think a lot of the builds you do with it. If you're taking a Witch King on Fellbeast, chances are you can deal with the Men of the West list. Um, like the list that I'm playing currently at 750 would wipes Men of the West every time. Unless there's like a weird scenario or something. Like Contest of Champions, I could see it getting weird if our champions start in the middle and then my all of my other warbands go in the back, I can see it going one way. But like other than that, having three, the way I run it, it has three casters, the Dark Marshal, the Witch King, and currently I'm playing it with Musger. I have tried it with the Mouth of Sauron. I do like Musger a little bit better. Then it has a bunch, actually not that many orcs, Shelob, and then some orcs and a drum. And it plays super well into Men of the West. And the reason is it can do anything at once. It can either kill the heroes, it can kill all the troops, or it can just sit there and move around the army with equal to faster speed and wait for the ideal time to go in while playing the scenarios at a better rate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, and just that flexibility, like that list is so flexible for me. I love that list. But the flexibility it has, especially against Men of the West, it's like Gwahir can't just sit around and wait to go in. It's like I have equal movement to Gwahir.
Mhm.
So if he's just not in the right spot, three spells, he's transfixed and moved. Like I can move him wherever I want him. So
Yeah.
in that matchup, it's extremely hard for Men of the West. At that part, their best chance is bubble up and call heroic resolves as they run into combat. Because otherwise, Gwahir's dead.
Yeah, I
And once
think
Gwahir's dead, it's tough.
yeah, Mass Magic specifically against the Gwahir build works. I think once you hit the Aragorn build and Gandalf build, it gets trickier. But one specific list shout out to Alex. Shadows of Angmar mass either Wither or Barrow Wights also does very well. Because yeah, Aragorn has his ring, he has resistant, he has resolve. But if you're throwing enough spells, one of them is gonna get through. It's gonna cause a problem, and if you can start to pick up tempo on Men of the West, it's really gonna be a powerful one. And you don't need a whole bucket of magic either. A list that does and has historically performed very well against Men of the West is Minas Morgul, something that I've run quite a bit over the past year or so, because just simply having again a Witch King on a Fell Beast with very good casting can scare Gwahir, it can scare Aragorn, despite the fact your Minas Morgul orcs are wounding on fours. Granted, a lot of the time you're going to be lower fight value depending on the presence of Morannons, but that list again can match the speed, it can kill the front line quite easily, and can also one-shot heroes as necessary. And I think something that's really important if you're playing an objective scenario that deals and has a lot of play with the dominance is to at least try and kill one of the heroes. In one of the games that I played against the Aragorn Legolas Gwahir, I basically sacrificed 3 points of might with the Witch King to kill Legolas, knowing that there wasn't going to be any dominant two in that area. So there are ways of playing around it, and I think, in those specific objective scenarios, having the ability to kill a hero and kill troops and shut down hero, kind of a balanced strategy, does play quite well into it overall.
I would agree with that. I would say pretty much you've got two options. In a scenario like that, you either have to kill one of the heroes, or you just have to keep their army off the objectives. So Minas Morgul
Hmm.
is fast enough to where it could just technically catch them and box the majority of their army off. It's not easy, but it is possible. But that is another option, right? Um, I mean, honestly, I think we've talked a lot about it. Really, a lot of it. I would say the biggest part is going into an army, knowing your list and knowing maybe this list can't deal with their heroes well. Maybe I just need to play the objectives and kill troops. Or going into it, my army is great at killing heroes. How can I bait and take out their heroes? You have to know your list and create a game plan. I would say that's the two biggest keys. So overall, Michael, where would you place Men of the West?
So I think it's a bit of a toss-up. Like I said, I think White Hand is the best system in the game, especially when it comes to objective play. Some of the other lists that you can throw around there are Men of the West. I think Usurpers is fantastic. And then there's a lot of, I think after that, there's a lot of these interesting lists that kind of have a lot of potential. And sometimes you see like a Casa Doom or a Last Alliance, or I'm blanking on other ones. But I think my ranking for where Men in the West goes is first best list goes to White Hand, and then I think I put Men in the West at two. I might put it. It's interchangeable between that and Usurpers, between two and three. Um,
Would this change anything? Would you consider a different ranking for um, veto system versus random or selected?
I think it does better in a non-veto system because it is pretty balanced in that it can handle a lot of scenarios versus a lot of armies like a Usurpers or maybe even a White Hand sometimes struggles with unique scenarios like, Contest or Lords of Battle, etc. So I think I'd probably keep it at a two spot if it's in a non-veto. Um, and yeah, I think a little bit of that. Also, we can talk about after you try maybe some of the potential changes in FAQ updates we might see.
Okay. For me, I think White Hand usurpers are both better. I would still consider in a veto system, I consider Shire better. Um,
Yes, for that's one
which a
that I was
lot of that
missing.
just I see so much potential in the Shire. And all of the games I've seen of people playing the Shire, most of the games they lose come down to a few just mistakes that they made in the game. Like it just is, they made a blatant mistake normally. Like the Shire can't handle any scenario in the game.
Yeah,
I've seen the Shire win Reconnoiter. Like it is
it
very good.
it does benefit significantly from veto, as
Um,
Alisher demonstrated in Nations Cup.
I would agree. Well, Nations Cup is also like who
It's
you're playing. And Nations
yeah.
Cup is good versus evil, which does not help because there's Usurpers, Minas Morgul, and White Hand, which all three are historically
Is it a
very
good?
decent.
Oh, it is good
It was
versus
good versus evil.
evil. Okay, that's right.
And it's team format of like they have the selected scenario, and then you're just like picking where they're playing, which means the other opponent, the other teams are really just guessing, oh, where are they going to put Alisher? Let's put something that will absolutely smoke the
Yeah,
shack, right?
yeah.
And considering three out of like what the four evil lists that are going to be in everybody's lineup are good against the Shire, I'm not surprised that happened. In a veto system, I would agree it's so much better. Just because you don't need to worry about those massive movement ones. But it does have the tools. It does have the banner. It does have the models. It does have the easy to protect heroes. It has decent killing power. It can handle it. I would say it's much better in veto. So in a veto
Yes.
system, I would consider Men of the West fourth. In a non-veto system, I would consider it third. And the reason
Okay.
for that is they just don't have a banner. I mean, they do, but if we're talking 800 points, add a banner and a few more bodies, and that list is up there.
Yeah, it does scale pretty well. I think something too, as we can just like quickly do a minute or two about some of the changes we'll see. There's been a lot of stuff thrown around, whether that's Guahir probably needs some adjusting just generally. Aragorn and Men of the West, but I think Trey and I, you've talked about this. The most pragmatic change I think is reducing the fearless bubble.
Yes. I
Um,
think, because here's the thing, lore-wise, the entire battle happened. They were like a little death ball that was running around. Why is the rule a whole board-wide thing? It should be the death ball. Like, just make it even a 12-inch bubble, I'd be happy. I would prefer it to be a 6-inch. I think a 12 inch is generous, and I would be totally fine with that. Because even then, in objective scenarios, it favors Aragorn being in the center of the board to favor that. I'm fine if Aragorn wants to be in the center of the board where I can go fight somewhere else in order for it to favor Aragorn, right?
yeah.
Anything that limits it. Like honestly, I don't think it needs much. I think that would do it. Because I think the issue is when you are in these escort the wounded games or divide and conquer, where you're in like 24 inches away from each other and they're just auto passing courage because Aragorn's alive. It's like they have zero way of knowing that Aragorn's still alive. It just doesn't make that much sense, and it's not more accurate.
Yeah.
But even that one little tweak, I think is plenty. Like I think White Hand is fine where it's at. Ideally, I would love the Curvain to be
Mm,
25 to 30 points just because it helps deal with both them and usurpers. Because I do think six Curvain is just disgusting for 20 points. Um,
yeah.
but even 25 points, the Curvain is fine. Like,
Yeah.
still heavily undercosted, but that would fix.
And I think one of the other changes that could happen is maybe something they did with AOL where it's like 50-50 Rohan and Minas Tirith. But
That would destroy Men of the West.
I think nevertheless it would there is going to be an FAQ change coming in August and we'll reevaluate when it comes to then. But Trey, if you and I want to now move on to our point of looking at scenarios.
Yes.
Alrighty, so we're now going to move on to the second part of our episode, which is going to be focusing on scenarios. And hopefully, over the next like six or so episodes, we're going to go through each of the pools, go through scenarios, and ultimately, the last episode. Now, let us know in the comments if you really want this. We've done this before in the Texas Discord where we've done a tier list. So, once we complete all the scenarios, I think we might do a tier listing episode of these scenarios. So let us know in the comments if you want that. That would be pretty fun for us to do. So let's dive into the scenarios themselves. Pool one, starting with the first, and what I would argue is the best scenario of all time, domination. So an oldie but a goodie.
100, 100% agree. By
And
far the
and
best scenario in the game.
we'll talk about why this is so good because I have so much to say about this one, even though it's so simple. So the layout of this is pretty simple. There's a central objective, and then each opponent gets basically two objectives that they can place anywhere on the board, have to be 12 inches away from each other and 6 inches away from a board edge. So it's not the normal pre-objectives have been put in place. You get to choose where you want them, which provides a lot of strategical decision. Then it's a 24-inch deployment zone, and the game lasts until quarter, which is one of the reasons it's great. And then the scoring points are super easy. It's one if you have more, two if you have double, and if you're the only one, again, these are all within 3 inches, you get 3 victory points, one for wounding the leader, two for killing them, one for break, three for break without being broken. So there's a lot of reasons that I love domination. The main one is I feel like a lot of scenarios, especially now, can be quite swingy, where you can kind of look at a matchup and a scenario and you can be like, all right, I'm kind of cooked. But domination, every army has a shot at and can do. And I think one of the important things is that's because quarter. Like even if you look at a Goblin Town army across the table, there are still ways of achieving victory and breaking them and having run-off objectives. And the scoring and the deployment of this is perfect because the way the objectives are set up, if you're an elite army, you can try and put objectives closer together. If you can spread them out, you can put them in a forest, you can put them in a building. Placing the objectives is one of the biggest parts of domination and what makes it so strategically fantastic. And the deployment 24-inch I enjoy as well because there's a lot of things that you can do in a 24-inch deployment where you can deploy warband back and then warband on the side to kind of confuse stuff. But ultimately, it just comes down to every army should play domination, and it is how the game ultimately is played because this game is a strategical game, but it is ultimately a movement game. The game is won or lost in the movement phase, and your ability to control areas on the battlefield is the most basic part of MESPG. And there's so much depth to that and scoring that I really enjoy. So I've said kind of my 3 cents, Troy. What are your thoughts on domination?
Oh, my thoughts on domination. Best scenario in the game. And this is what I'm going to go back to for the next 40 minutes where we talk about these scenarios. The biggest thing to me when I'm looking at scenarios, more than pretty much end conditions, is deployment. 12-inch deployment, I hate with most lists.
Hmm.
It really does depend on the list. So when I look at my list, the first thing I'm looking at rather than win conditions is the deployment because a 24-inch deployment is so good. It's so flexible. So most of my lists, I will play heavy engage or this weird form of heavy skirmish, which both of which really do like a 24-inch deployment. Sometimes I'll play a heavy shooting list, and at that point I like the 12-inch. But for most of my lists I play, I like 24-inch. And so that one is a big win for me. Secondly, like you said, the moving of the objectives, they're never going to be in the same place. This is why it's so much better than capturing control. It's a different game every time you play it.
Yeah,
Not only are you going to be playing against a different opponent, a different army, playing with a different army, you're also going to be playing almost an entirely separate objective, a different game completely because of how they're placed, because of the boards you're on. The game, it's like a scenario that inside itself is like 30 different scenarios. Like
yeah,
all of the other scenarios are like one scenario, and then the variances come from all the other lists. This one has all of that plus the variance of the scenario itself. It is beautiful. Like it's wonderful.
yeah. And
It's
it,
got all of the right balances. This is the biggest thing for me. The kill points, the break, the holding objectives, the balance is perfect. The points are spread so well. If you play a perfect game, you can get a 20-0. If you play slightly better than your opponent, that reflects. You get an 11-9 or something. It is so reflexive of how the game is played in how it ends
yeah,
up. Whereas you'll get random like assassination games where you both play it well and one person wins it like 19-2 or something, right? This
yeah.
one is so reflexive. If both players play well, it will be an extremely close game.
Yeah, it is always a game that can be played. One of the things I love about the objectives is also the way it interacts with terrain. Because a lot of times on some boards you'd be like, oh, the objective goes here. Oh goodness, this is right in a building. Let's move it over like an inch, or let's move the building. Like this allows you to directly interact with the terrain. The scoring system also is, it also rewards like if you are getting absolutely destroyed. There's a very famous episode of The Green Dragon that I love listening to about how Jeremy successfully does this with the Iron Hills, where it's 3 points if you have no one near, but it's 2 points even if you're double. You can have 15 models, but if you can sneak one model within 3 inches of that objective, it denies your opponent's points. There's a lot of ways that every small little thing can contribute to points, and it doesn't have to be a hero or the second highest model or a banner or a leader. Simply just knowing how to control your basic infantry is a way how to win this game. It's very impactful the way the scoring does. Again, I like that there's no banner. It's it's a very simple scenario, but at its core has an incredible amount of depth. And like you said, every single game is going to be different. Whether you're an elite army, whether you're not an elite army, there are ways to play this game. And again, like you said, a lot of the times it's kind of the most devastating feeling on both sides when you walk away from what you guys thought was a close game and it's a 20-0. Like no one wants to play a 20-0 game. Even if you're a competitive person, you still want that challenge. Either way,
Oh,
I
20-0.
but domination allows it's very tricky to get a 20-0 or an 18-0 or a 16-0 because a lot of the times both players have something to play for, even down to two or three models left on the board, and it really encourages both players to have an interactive game for all, hour and a half, 2 hours, versus some games like a contest or an assassination or other games where there are within sometimes the first 20 minutes you already know what the game is going to be versus domination, you always have something to play for. So it's one of the reasons why I
Correct.
love it so much.
And I would say here's the thing, it is the most balanced scenario in the game. If you have a lot of issues where you have scenarios where it's really just dice, because there are some scenarios where it's like Contest of Champions, you could just roll a too high on 3 dice on your big hero and lose your big hero in one turn. This scenario, that's just not how it works. You're not going to be put in the position where you have to be here. If you lose this roll, you lose the entire game. It's like, no, every single thing matters. There are so many different factors that they all balance out in the end.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, all like what, 500 dice you roll in a game, they're not all going to come against you. Not every single one. And even if they do, you could still theoretically win if you move right and keep them off the objectives. You could win with never rolling a six in domination.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
it's so well balanced.
it's great. We're gonna move on to its kind of cousin, which I've played a lot of this, and it's a very interesting scenario. Capture and control.
Love it.
So capture and control is interesting. The objectives, unlike domination, are set up one in the middle and then two each on the side, two up and bottom, spread out in this basically perfect formation where they're all aligned. The deployment, I personally have a problem with one because it's kind of confusing, and two because I think it's the should be the other way around. But
Agreed.
basically, you roll a dice, and on a one, two, or three, your warband has to deploy up front, so the first 12 inches. On a four, five, or six, one, two, or three, you can deploy
It's anywhere.
anywhere,
And the
which
reason for that is fine. The reason for it is they're trying to say
is
shooting
shooting.
lists, you're done in this list. In
Yes,
this one. You're
which
gonna get
which I
one turn of shooting.
understand. But I think it would make it way more interactive if it was the opposite way. On one, two, three, you have to deploy on the back because as much as shooting is
Correct.
a prevalent issue, it's very easy just to tag all the objectives, run forward, and you don't even need a person on them. So that one's a bit weird. It ends on break on a one to a two. You roll the dice. So sometimes the game ends way too early. Sometimes you get tabled because it never ends. And then the scoring here again is pretty simple. It's three for controlling each objective. That's it. General wound is one, kill is three, break is one, break without being broken is two. And then the way objectives are controlled is you want to have a model in base contact who hasn't done anything, and then you flip that objective to your controlling side. The only issue is if you both have a model in contact, it becomes neutral, and all objectives start neutral. So again, it's a similar objective play. The couple of gripes I have with it compared to Domination is the deployment's a little bit weirder. The objectives are pretty stable in that. I don't mind that as much, but again, we talked about why we like spreading out the objectives in every game differently. I also find that I don't hate the break one to two. I think there are some scenarios that really need it. I wouldn't mind if this was quarter, but there's been games where, you've had a distinct advantage and then you lose it after you never roll a one or a two, and that's a bad feeling. Or vice versa, where you have a good point and you need one or two more turns, and then the dice comes a one or two, and you're like, well, that's game. So I don't mind it. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but again, I think you need to balance it in the scenarios. The points I think are all fine. Ironically enough, I find that capturing control in the games that I've played are just always big wins. I'm trying to think of a game where it was like kind of even in capture and control, but I mean, when I've played Trey in it, like I think that one with the Witch King and Azog was super swingy. The ones that I've won like 18-0, like 16-0. So I think it is a much more swingy game. but again, kind of values a lot of movement and mobility over, strategic planning. But I still really like capturing control. I wouldn't say it's a bad scenario.
Yes, I would agree. I think the one thing I have with it is there are a lot of dice involved simply with break. And then two, once people are out of might, priority pretty much decides who wins the game.
Sure.
Because if you've got enough models and both sides are out of might, somebody could win priority, pin all everybody else's models, tag all the objectives, even if they don't have that many models, and win the game that way. So dice do come in, but I also think that makes for a fun game because there's a lot of like, how do I defend against this? How do I use tactics to defend against the off chance that like these two things happen where they do that and then it ends that turn? So there
Yeah.
is a lot of strategic play in that and like, how am I going to prevent this? Which I do think creates an interesting like game within a game of like protecting against like this one possibility of like the two dice things adding up in one turn. Uh, I think it's literally just cheap man's domination. Like
Yeah.
if your opponent vetoes some domination, this is like your next best bet for a balanced game.
Yeah. I don't think there's any problems with it. I kind of talked a little bit bad about it, but I really
I
enjoy
mean,
it still. I think it's a
to be
good scenario.
fair, our game where I had Azog and you had the Witch King probably did give you a bad taste of that scenario.
To be fair though, since I played capturing control, I've done very well. Yeah, my advice only for capturing control, if you have a shooting army, still contest the objectives. Like don't just sit back there and
Yes.
shoot. Because versus is a
And,
domination, they run away and they can just tag the objectives, plug you, and you're kind of cooked. So you have to play and you have to tag them.
yes. Sit 6 inches away from your opponent, get one turn of shooting, and then go in. Like that's
Yeah.
it is what it is. You're not going to get 4 or 5 turns of shooting.
Yeah, you will sacrifice objectives that way. I don't remember if this next one. Oh, this one's gonna be fun. Trey and I think very differently about this one. I really like it. Trey does not. It is stake a claim. So this is one of the new scenarios that they brought in. This one has the layout basically exactly the same as before. There's one in the middle, two on the sides, one and two up and below, whatever that is. This one is a 12-inch deployment zone. And the way this one works is every turn matters. So you score objectives by having, at the end of every turn, you count who has more models within a certain objective. And then you tally that to what they call fortification points. So you get one fortification point for each marker that has both friendly and enemy, but you have more. And then you get two that is just you completely own it. There's no enemy models within that. And then the way
Okay.
this game ends is quarter, and then the victory points I really like this way. It's four if you have more. If you have twice as many, it's eight. If you have three times as many, which I have never seen, is 12. 1-3 for general, 1-3 for break. And then this one I think is very key. Is at the end of the game, whoever controls the most objective markers scores an additional two, which means you are somewhat rewarded for completely like wiping out your opponent. Even if they built up a big lead, you can still score some points at the end. So I'm gonna let
Okay.
Trey talk
Okay.
about this because I can see he's
Now
ready.
I got to talk about my feelings. So here's the thing. Michael and I do have very different opinions. I'm the one that's consistent here. So I talked highly of
Oh,
domination for all of these beautiful reasons for like how it can be played in different ways. This scenario forces the most singular static game plan. Doesn't matter what army you have to run into the middle and you have to stay there on these objectives. Otherwise, you instantly lose the game. There is no variance. No matter what you're playing against, you have to do the exact same thing. And then there's a little bit of play on the scenarios, but other than that, it's running forward and using dice. Like that's what it is. This scenario is my worst favorite scenario in the entire game, hands down. And the reason for that is it forces your gameplay the entire game. I like games where I'm not forced to do something, but rather I can work on setting things up, setting up tricks. And there are still opportunities for that, but it forces where you are on the table, where your opponent is. Everything is so forced that there's so little variance that I feel like the scenario gets so boring after a few times and it's just terrible. Now you can talk about how good it is, Michael.
all right. So the reasons I like this, one, it is a good counter to shooting armies and kiting armies, which Trey likes to play, and personally, no one likes to play against. So one of the reasons that
Their
I
fault.
prefer that way. All right, buddy.
I
So
also play Khazad Doom with heavy throwing weapons. That
one
list
of
actually doesn't
the
mind this one.
reasons I like that is I think I've had a lot of games. I know a lot of people have had other games where you have very, very dominant win. you're doing very well, and then a couple bad rolls happen, you break, you run, you lose, where you've been in control basically the entire time until the last turn. This scenario basically rewards you for playing the objectives, which Trey doesn't like. But in order to play those objectives, you have to contest some of the objectives. But the fact that the victory points at the end are worth two, and if you have more, you only get four. If you have less and you still break them without being broken, you still either wound or kill their general, and you have more at the end after you sweep into them, you can still win quite easily. The gripe that I have a little bit with the scoring system is they kind of got into this a little bit, which the one off the top of my head is hold ground, where it's like 4, 8, and 12. Same thing with reconnoiter, where I think a lot of the time I would prefer a little bit more spread because I don't think there's really ever happen where double is extremely hard to get, triple is impossible to get. So a lot of those VPs are never really going to matter. But I think what it allows you to do is you have to play some of the objectives, but it also allows you to somewhat kind of play around and kite around, but you still have that ability to take over the game at the very end. So I think it's a way of balancing and rewarding a player who does well at the beginning, and even if they have a bunch of bad dice rolls at the end, can still lose, and vice versa. So I think it reduces the amount of dice variance in the game, which is sometimes a negative play experience. I can see where you're coming from, where this is the only way to play the scenario, and you lose if you don't do that. But that's kind of what scenarios are. You're kind of forced to play the objectives anyways. But I like it mainly just also because it nerfs shooting armies substantially, which is a negative play experience. So I don't know if there's too much else you want to add on to that, Troy. I I don't
I'm
rate it
not.
as
Here's the
highly as
thing.
I did,
Here's
but
the thing. I think you actually treated it very fairly. I will say that. In the past, you've glazed it so much. So,
I did. I
but
do like me some stake acclaim generally, but
if I'm playing the Dragon Emperor or something that's D6 that can march up super fast and has good dominance, i.e., Men of the West, it's fine. But the issue
yeah,
is oftentimes your opponent doesn't agree. It's
this is true.
it's a rock paper scissors scenario. I think the tweaking of victory points is where I would do it. I would do 4 for single,
Yep.
7 for double, and like 9 for triple.
Yeah, something
And
like that.
then
And then
those extra 3 VPs from the triple pop somewhere else. Create some
yeah,
other ways to score VPs so that it isn't just this is the only thing. That's also
yeah,
my one thing with capturing control. The scenarios are really the only thing that matters
yeah.
because that's 15
Moving
of
on.
victory
Yeah,
points.
moving on to the last one in the pool. And honestly, I think pool one might be our favorite because this is another fantastic scenario in breakthrough, which is similar to, again, the objective setup, except you don't have one in the middle, you just have two on the side and one up and one down. It's a 24-inch deployment zone, like we talked about, and it ends at quarter. But basically, you get more victory points for taking your opponent's back objective than for any of the other objectives. The goal is, as it's called, to break through and sneak in behind. So I'm just going to quick read out the VP breaking here because there's a bunch of it. So it's if you have more friendly models within your own objective, which is in your own deployment zone, so about halfway through, you get one victory point. That one you should get most of the time. You get one if you have more on each of the side ones that start on that 24-inch line. And if there's no enemy models, you get three instead. You get three if you have more friendly models in the back objective, five if you are the only one with models on their back objective, one for wound on general, two for killing general, one for break, two for break without being broken, two victory points for no banners at the end of the game, and then one victory point for wounding the highest costed model, two for killing the highest costed model that isn't a general. So a ton of different VP spreads there, a lot to unpack. I love the scenario because again, it really forces a dynamic kind of not really capture the flag game in that retrieval I don't like because it can be set up. But it's really where you're trying to play this cat and mouse game where you're like, I'm trying to push through on this flank. I need to defend this flank because it's all really just about protecting your back objective. But again, for the same reasons we talked about domination, this 24-inch deployment, the flexibility and mobility, and kind of this tactical game that you and your opponent play. I think sometimes where it falls through are one of the gripes I have with it is you score more for having more, but there's no double. It's only more or no enemy models. and it's kind of hard sometimes, especially in higher points costs with more models, to just have objectives with no enemy models around them. So it would be nice if it was maybe double you get the full points instead of having no. The banner VPs are okay because there's nothing there, and then obviously they tried to FAQ the highest points model if they're all the same, but they only addressed it if you killed them, not what happens if you wound one of them. I think most tournaments are ruling it pretty much the same anyways, but I like Breakthrough overall. It's a very fun and dynamic game. Um, Kind of similar to Domination, but kind of forces more going into the back mobility. It does, however, really reward anything with 12-inch fly. So Kerbane are very good at this scenario.
Yes. This scenario I think is one last edition. This was my favorite scenario. This edition, I would actually rate it very comparably, simply because this is one where if I have a banner, I have no issue playing it. And the reason is there's so many ways to get victory points and nullify the victory points for the banner, right?
Yeah,
There's so many different ways you can get victory points that it's not like, oh, protect this one hero and get this objective and I win the game. It's you got to do everything right. You have to watch for everything. Everything you can do for a trick to pull out some victory points. It is such a micro management style of game that I love it. You've got to watch your second hero, your banner, your main general. These two little objectives that can be crucial. These big
hmm
objectives. There's so many things going on. From my experience, this is the one issue I would keep it up there with domination is a list that is good at heavy engaging while having a really good amount of shooting, instant wins. I will cite a game where I had my Kaza Doom, which if you've ever played me, I do
range.
not play it normally. I play max, like a ton of models. So I will take like 12 to 13 rangers with bows, a few with throwing weapons, and then 8 iron guard, and then a few shields. And it's great because with the mirrors and the bows, you're never going to outshoot me. Like I've
And the
got the same amount of
dominance.
archery as everybody else. And then I'm super aggressive still because I've got the iron guard and all the throwing weapons. So as soon as they go anywhere, they know they can't sit on their back objective and just wait for my aggressiveness to get to them because then I'll just shoot them to pieces and take the middle ones. But if they come up front, then I'm able to shoot them and then put my aggressive pieces to get through to their back. Like lists like that, where they've got a great amount of shooting and are super aggressive, have such a good time in this scenario. So that
Yeah,
is one thing. If you're playing veto and you come up against anything that has a good amount of shooting but still has great combat and aggressive abilities, veto immediately because this will not go well for you.
yeah. This scenario really rewards aggression. Like that one or
Correct.
two key heroic combats that can punch through and then your whole army kind of spreads through, which I think is really useful because a lot of the scenarios like and some of the gripes you can have with Middle Earth are, oh, I'm just gonna sit here and shoot you, and I have the banner, so I will. This one, you have to be proactive in order to win. You can't sit back. So it's really great in that way. And again, like there are some matchups you'll get into where you're like, they have a drum or they have a bunch of flying things, and it can be trickier. But again, it's not impossible, and there's tons of ways to score victory points, which again provides a balanced way and relies less on the dice and more on the tactics, which is what we're here for. So,
Yep. And I mean, in that, this is scenario is one of the prime examples why you should always have at least 3 bows. Because if you're one of those lists that's kind of screwed into an opponent, keep your 3 bows on the back objective, and then keep a mid-range hero that can be decent about halfway in between the front line and your back line and the back objective, so that he can support them if an aggressive front comes with a few troops, or support the front if that's needed. And then you just set up your army for an engage. This is why you need some bows because they can do some cover fire. They can be decent. Always take a handful of bows, and then you want, if you have a mid-range hero, deploy him kind of in between your main battle line and that back objective with a few guys. That's my biggest suggestion.
yeah. It's a really great scenario, and the deployment too, like we've talked about, 24-inch deployment zone, especially where deploying in the center isn't really the best, sometimes isn't the best option, but oftentimes can be a really cool option because if your opponent deploys on the side objectives and you deploy in the center, you got a straight shot at their objective. So it's a really great scenario. I personally think pool one is one of my favorite pools. I think I used to like a lot of the unique ones too. I've started to move away from those, but it's They are sometimes the most simple scenarios are the best and most tactically deep scenarios, and I think with these, it provides just that. So really enjoy pool one, and hopefully next time we'll get into the other pools. But thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. And if you have any disagreements, or if you got anything wrong, or if you have an idea about Men of the West, or if you even just want to drop a list that Trey and I will look at, go ahead and do that. We really enjoy, reading comments and going through all that stuff. So,
Real.
Trey, you got
Yep.
anything else to add?
Please go hate on me in the comments if you like Steak a Claim, because I will sit there and laugh at you.
I'm gonna create a burner account now.
Do it.
Kevin Durant, baby. No.
Uh,
Alrighty.
but yeah, that
So
was
that's all
fun.
from us.
Pool one, pool one is amazing.
It's
That's all
great.
I've got to say.
If you want to teach someone how to play the game, pull out a good old game of domination. It's the best way to do it. Alrighty,
Yep.
guys. Thank you for listening. See you next time.